Hello, everybody, welcome back. I'm Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be going over the all-roll tier list. So I already have a tier list for support, so be sure to go check that out in depth. And I have an 80 carry tier list, so check that out in depth as well. We're going to go over those really quickly, and then we're going to get to the mid, the jungle, and the top, and go over those as fast as we can. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It helps out a ton on the channel. Check out the rest of the content, like I just mentioned, those other tier lists. But we also stream every night starting around 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Wonderful, very chill community. I try to explain everything that I'm doing in the game and be pretty honest about my performance, and try to add some advice in there for people to learn from, and just have a conversation as well with the chat, sometimes just about random things, about education or culture or movies or whatever people want to talk about. I try to constantly be interacting and talking with the chat. So anyways, be sure to check all that out. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So just a real quick recap of the supports. I think that Rakan and Nami are probably the two best ones overall right now. Rakan is just so flexible. I get asked this all the time, so I'm not going to, and I talk about it every tier list for like 20 minutes, so I don't want to get sucked into that black hole. But basically, he's so versatile because he can serve as one of the strongest engaged champions in the game, and he can peel really well in the game. He has the best mobility of any support, allows him to get really deep vision, allows him to reposition and sort of just make plays that other supports really can't make. And then he also scales pretty well too, especially for an engaged champion, because he has a nice shield that's basically a 280 base with a 1.6 ratio when you count both of the shields that he can put out. So that's just really strong. And his itemization also makes him extremely flexible. He can go for enchanter type of items if your 80 carry is really far ahead, like a Zeke's plus an Ardent Sensor, or he can go for a speed up type of comp. With something like a Shirelia's into a Redemption. If you have something like a Darius or a Seth that's really fed on your team, you can go for a team fight comp with like a Redemption and a Locket. If they have a Karthus on their team, or they have some really crazy like AoE comp with like a Mumu, Misfortune, Jarvan, Rumble, that type of stuff. So he can just respond to almost any situation, even if they have all AD, right? They've got like 4 AD champs on their team, and you're the primary engage. You can even go something like Frozen Heart and Knight's Vow. And be very tanky and sustainable in fights. So it has a ton of different itemization options, ton of different ways you can play him. You can go for lane dominance, you can roam. There's just, it feels like he's always relevant and live in any game. Like, it just doesn't feel like you get starved out ever. Like, there's always a possibility you can make the big play and potentially come back into the game. So that's why I like Rakan a lot. Nami's someone who has been coming up a lot more lately. The biggest thing about this is some of her best competition got nerfed out. So like Sona and Soraka were nerfed pretty hard on this patch. And so Soraka's definitely fallen like south of 50%. And Sona's clocking in at about 50%. And Nami was already trending up. She got a change a couple of patches ago to help her work with mages a lot more. Because spells now apply her E to people for the slow. So that's really handy. And then she just has really nice peel. Combined with different enchanter type of buffs, right? She can control tempo really well with the slows off of her E, off of her ult. She has really good, some of the best trading early on for an enchanter in lane, because your W not only does damage, but it heals you as well. In the early game, you can CC multiple people with your bubble plus your ult. So you're not as susceptible to grievous wounds as some of the other champs out there, because you have so much CC in your kit. As well. So she's just kind of the premier early game bully champ that controls tempo really well. So I think she's pretty solid. Like, her wave as engage is not amazing. It's okay. It is very slow, but if they're close to choke points, or you have them like pinned against a wall or something like that, then her ult can be pretty solid. So she's all around a really good, solid support champion. And then Janna is rising up as well. I think you're going to start to see some more hyper carries come out as we start to see more tanks if the meta slows down. It's already pretty slow, but if we start to get less overall burst damage, less flanking, less assassins, you could be seeing more things like Jinx popping out a little bit more. You could see Twitch popping out a little bit more. So there are a lot of kind of these scaling champs, Kog'Maw, that you might start seeing a little bit more. And Janna's one of the safer versions that can buff up those types of champs, because she has her peel with her ult, she has her tornado. The tornado, by the way, is extremely good against Lee Sin, Zac, and all these other really popular divers that are coming back into the meta. I mean, Lee never leaves the meta, but Zac is starting to come back a little bit. So Janna's just really good, and that extra 50 AD or so that she gives to the AD carry is really underrated. And if 80 carries start to matter a bit more, and I think that they will over the next few patches as tanks come in and there are less assassins, I think 80 carries will start to become a bit more relevant. Then Janna is going to be one of the forefront champions. She's almost always one of the best supports when 80 carries are pretty strong in metas. And they haven't been strong for, I would say, about the last year or so consistently in solo queue, but they might be making a comeback here. Lulu's another one who's been coming up a lot lately, and I've been talking about this for a couple of patches. Her win rate's definitely been trending up, but she's had several direct buffs too. Oh, thank you, Rory. Rory's bringing me my shoes. Thank you, Rory. I'll put them on in just a second, okay? You gonna put on the hat, Rory? Is that a hat for you? You want to put it on? No. Yeah. Now you're a cool kid from the 90s. But she did get a couple of buffs. I think she got 20 on her shield, and they reduced the cooldown to 8 seconds. So that's very relevant, and her shield is nice. It does apply picks to people, so they get a little bit more auto attack damage. She does have the burst infusion of health with her ult. So that part of the scaling isn't so great. She doesn't scale as amazingly with plus healing and shielding because her ult gains no benefit from it, and her shield is a pretty low ratio. I think it's like a 0.6 AP ratio on it. So that's not insane. Her Q is borderline worthless. It does apply a little bit of a slow, a little bit of poke early on. But that W, just getting that speed up and being able to give all that extra attack speed with your on-hit damage from picks makes her pretty versatile because she's going to be extremely strong with anyone that uses Gensus and like Blade the Ruined King, all that kind of stuff. So that's like Twitch, Kog'Maw, Varus, Vayne. All those champs are going to be pretty good because you give them a lot of extra move speed and attack speed. But even the movement speed can be really nice on a champion like Darius or like Echo or Diana that just wants to run in and just stick to people and be close. And that infusion of health that you give up and that little knock up with your R and the accompanying slow can be very strong for those types of champs. So she's really good with kind of the rundown comps and with kind of the peeling, scaling comps as well. So I think she's fine in a lot of places right now. It can be kind of tough with her if they have a lot of poke on their team or if they just have an overload of like dive and burst champions. She really doesn't peel that well. It's okay. Like she's got her ult, she's got her polymorph, but she's not going to be as good at like flat out peeling as something like a Janna. So Zac is still going to be a major problem if he gets on top of you, and you don't have a lot of ways to stop that. You can ult the person that Zac is trying to E on top of, and if you do it at the right time, it'll knock him out of his elastic slingshot. So you do have some answers, but it does get a bit harder as that goes on. But yeah, I mean, just with an Ardent Sensor and then Shirelia's being very strong now allows you to double down on kind of the speed comp. So I think that's pretty nice that you can go for that and you don't have to go for Redemption. You don't have to go for Mikhail's in this matter right now. You have another option with Shirelia's. So I think that makes her pretty good right now. And then you have Nautilus, who's just kind of the engaged tank that I think is still like, all right. His win rate has gone down a bunch. He is a lower win rate than Leona, but I think he's a bit safer, a bit more well-rounded. He does pretty good damage and has nice wave clear with his E, and then his point click on his ult is very good, especially with Stopwatch getting nerfed on this patch. So I think that he's another one who's pretty good. Okay, and once again, if you want more like in-depth stuff about that and you want to see more supports, check out the support tier list. Okay, as far as 80 carry, we'll bust through this pretty quickly, and then we'll get to the mid and the jungle, because I know that's kind of the newer stuff. So be sure to check out the 80 carry tier list if you want more details about it. But Aphelios, I think, is still going to be number one. He doesn't have the highest win rate in the world and in solo queue, but if you're into someone who's a really good Aphelios, he's still just a monster right now. He just does so many things. He's so strong. It's just, I mean, the big thing is it's just hard to figure out what's going on with him. Like and it's because like his normal gun can apply offhand weapon damages, and there's so many different permutations of guns and situations you can have. So for example, you can have a flamethrower that is spitting out the gravitum bolts, and that can allow you to get a surprise root on somebody in the laning phase from like pretty far range. And you can even get a root on multiple people in team fights with that, or by using the gravitum ult. So that's really nice. And then like getting the flamethrower on your turret, for example, in team fights can just do a ton of AoE damage. So he just has a lot of tricks up his sleeve. He gets like free sustain and early on in the laning phase with his W, or with his red gun, I should say, and like the isolation damage on that in an all-in like level 2 is really high as well. there's just a lot of situations where he's going to be strong, he's going to be relevant. It just takes a little bit of getting used to. He is kind of hard to play, but he just does too much. He has too much utility. Even though they have nerfed him a few times, he's still just too strong. So I would still put him at number 1. And then Cassiopeia is another one that I put really highly. Now, a lot of other tier lists may not put her this high, or they may not explain it very well. I think a lot recognize that she's pretty good right now as AD carry, but it just doesn't get articulated very well. She's the highest win rate at 55% in AD carry, and she's actually played in that lane 15% of the time. So she's played a decent amount there, despite the fact that she's, mostly known as a mid laner. And what sets her up really nice in the AD carry role is she serves the AD carry function of doing high sustained damage with her Noxious Blast, her Q, and her E. She can melt dragons, melt barons, melt through tanks. So she does that like what a traditional AD carry does. But she also comes online a lot faster, I think. Like, you can really run people down and kill them as soon as you get tier. A lot of times you just have enough mana to go murder them. And she just has more utility, I think, about her, especially early on in the game. You have the Miasma to help you control people's movement, to stop them from flashing. So if you have a Nautilus or a Leona that engages somebody and you drop that Miasma, they're not going to be able to flash out of it for a while. And then you have your ult, which is a really good sort of peeling tool if people are trying to dive onto you. And it also allows you to make your own plays in the early to mid game once you hit 6. If you're able to push up really fast, which you can, and just do like a fake back, have a control ward, circle around, and just hang out in their lane bush. And then as soon as they walk up, to try to ward it, they'll probably think that you backed, and you just ult them out of the bush, drop the miasma on them, and just spam all your spells, and they're going to die. So the fact that she can make her own plays like that, there aren't that many other AD carries or champions in the AD carry position that can make their own play, get their own kills. Even if your support's AFK or roaming or whatever, you can still have some pretty decent game. And to that effect as well, if you get hard camped bottom, your support is really far behind, or they're roaming or whatever, your jungler's not coming down to help, you can still like farm the jungle and get back into the game a little bit because you farm so quickly. Once you get your Archangels, you can start farming like the bottom golems or Gromp or whatever. So if it's not safe to walk out into your lane, if you're getting zoned and your jungler refuses to come down and help you break the zone or whatever, you can just farm some of their stuff. Just take their Gromp, take the blue, whatever. And if they have a problem with that, they can come down and help you deal with your lane. So that's what I say to that. But you do have an option to do that type of stuff. And other AD carries, it might be too hard for them to clear up jungle camps, or they might get too low doing it. But the fact that she does such high sustained damage, you can even take dragons yourself, right? If the junglers are both just fighting top lane and you have priority bot and you're winning, you can just go take the dragon yourself. So she's really kind of a do-it-yourself type of champ, even if other things are going wrong in the game. And you scale really well, too, and you still have some nice utility in team fights with your ult. So even if you're behind, I feel like she can get back in the game a lot more than other AD carries out there. So I think she's a tremendous champ right now. And then Miss Fortune's still going to be really good, has great harass early on, fairly easy to execute on. She gets a lot of free movement speed, allows her to rotate around the map, get preferable back timings. And then you just combo really well with a lot of these team fight comps. You just press ult, it does like 900% of your total AD to everybody. And she actually goes toe-to-toe and can do quite a bit of sustained DPS too, because your W is going to give you 100% extra attack speed. So I think that makes her very strong. And then your E is actually pretty decent, too, for setting up fights. It's got really long range. I think it's like 1,100 range. Might even be more than that. And it's just a point-click slow. So if your team is, like, looking for that engage, you can actually help them out. You can't, it's not like an Ash Arrow or a Varus ult. You can't actually hit the engage yourself. But sometimes just putting that slow on them gives some of your engaged champs on your team, like your Nautilus, your Leona, your Sejuani, your Zac, whatever, gives them an opening to go in there and get that engage themselves. So I think she's going to be very solid, especially with team fight comps right now. Senna's another one I think is really good, and this is kind of like in the Cassiopeia camp. Not exactly the same, but the fact that she just has so much utility. She has very good poke early on. She's got the root with her W. She has her ult, which can have cross-map presence to make plays. She's got her heal, which is wave clear and sustain. So she just has a lot of utility. She has really cheap items with the Manamune and either Dustblade or Ghostblade. So you're going to come online a lot faster than other champs. And she obviously scales extremely well with those the soul stacks as the game goes on. I don't know how she performs in a tanks. I feel like it's going to be kind of difficult if they have a lot of armor, because you don't attack very quickly. Typically, you rely on lethality with like Dustblade and Ghostblade, and that's really weak against armor on just like an apples to apples comparison, because armor is just much cheaper for its effectiveness than lethality is. Like lethality, I believe it's something like 30 gold per point of lethality. I don't remember the exact number, but armor is 20 for a point of armor, and lethality doesn't even erase a full point of armor until level 18. So armor counters lethality pretty hard. So that can be rough if they're running like a Zac in the jungle and an Ornn top lane. You may not want Senna rather, but she is still really good in a lot of situations out there. And she just has a lot of utility, like I said. So I think she deserves to be up there. And then Kallista's the one that I talked about a lot in my 80 carry tier list, because she has been basically MIA for years and years and years. We haven't seen consistently a Kallista meta. But the meta's slowing down enough right now to where you're not getting as many burst champions. Crit has been nerfed a lot. People are kind of moving away from assassins a little bit, and people are playing more sustained damage champs, either tanks or champions, where they typically have to run you down a little bit. And so having that kiting off of Kallista is really nice. Being able to go Blade into Hurricane is very good for team fighting. So she has a really nice 1 and 2 item power spike. She can bully out in lane, and the damage is slowing down enough to where her spears are going to be really strong. The thing is, she actually does pretty strong sustained damage because she has really high, a really high attack speed ratio, and she takes lethal tempo. And each one of her auto attacks does quite a bit. It's like 100 and it's like, I forgot what it is. It's like 30 plus, like 130% AD or something like that every auto attack. But the problem is you don't get that up front, and none of that can crit. So if you're in a meta that's like a heavy crit meta and a Jhin, you know, just like with like the really strong Storm Razor and Infinity Edge before the nerfs, and then like if you have Dark Harvest and things like that, you know, he could walk up and just about two-shot you at some point, and then your spears aren't going to matter, right? You chuck a few spears into him, and then you're just dead. But if the meta slows down a little bit, if crit's been nerfed a lot, and now all of a sudden you can get like 7 spears into him, then you can blow him up. So there comes a certain point where she's going to out DPS crit users, but the DPS doesn't matter if you get bursted first. If you get deleted, you know, 1 second into a fight, it doesn't matter if you out DPS them if you've put more damage on them by 5 seconds into the fight than they've put on you, because all of their damage is going to be front loaded. So that's really where she starts to become strong, is when against these kind of lower damage teams where they've got a tank in the jungle. You know, you're against something like a Sejuani in the jungle. They have an Ornn top, and then, you know, they're running like, I don't know, an Ezreal 80 carry or something like that with a Tahm Kench. You know, it's like a really low damage comp overall. Then that's where she's really going to shine. She's going to have just tons and tons of time to stack those spears in and really make some plays. So, anyways, I think that she has a lot of potential. And she does have that utility, too, where she can sort of not exactly make her own play. Your support has to be close to you, but you can throw your support in for an engage, which can be really good when combined, you know, with something like a Nautilus, Leona, Rakan, even something like a Braum. Taric is used sometimes too. So there are a lot of options with Kallista. Okay, let's get to some of these other roles here. Now, Diana and Echo I have listed here as mid, but they can both flex in a jungle, and I think they can probably both flex in a top into some matchups as well. So those are just two of the strongest champs overall in this patch, but we'll talk about them in terms of mid lane. So Diana has received several buffs. If you haven't, you know, played in a while or you haven't seen her, she has the highest like win rate to play rate, I think, with like a 9% play rate in the mid lane and almost a 54% win rate. So these are like both kind of like battle mage type of things. I mean, you can call them assassins, but they do want, like, they have builds where they want to attack speed and they want to be casting spells over time, and they both have pretty good utility about them as well. So Diana made it to where she does have a jump pre-6, so that you can actually jump away from things. I believe it's not targeted. It might be a targeted jump. But either way, you do have some kind of gap closer pre-6, which is really nice for getting in on some of these trades to people. And even on escapes, that can be pretty good. And then it gives her like a whole lot more damage, because her little pull-in spell, which is now her ult, used to be her W, I believe. And it just didn't do any damage. It just pulled people in and slowed them for a certain amount of time. Well, now all of her spells, all 4 of them, contribute to her damage. So she got a massive boost in damage. And then I believe they increased her survivability on her orbs too. So she's just really hard to kill with Conquer stacking up, and you're going to get the healing off of Conquer. I believe she's going to take things like Ravenous Hunters. You're going to get the healing off of that. And then you're going to have like Rod of the Ages, which is going to give you a large health pool and healing, and you're going to have your shield as well. That's going to give you even more survivability. So it's very difficult to blow her up, and she does pretty high sustained damage. Like, she has nice burst if she ults and, hits everything, double taps you with her E after she Qs. She can do a lot of damage, but then she can stay in combat if you go like Nashor's Tooth, which the most common build, I believe, is Rod into Nashor's for mid laner. So she can actually do really, really good sustained damage, too. So not only can she, blow up squishy champions, but she has decent game against tanks, too, because she's just going to sit there and just keep auto-attacking, and once Conqueror gets stacked, she gets all that healing going. She's, just going to be very difficult for a tank to kill, and she's going to be tanky herself compared to tank output damage, but then she's going to be putting out a lot more damage. So that's the thing, is that she can be a sort of a tank buster, as well as just a squishy one-shot champion. And she takes dragons and barons really quickly because of her passive as well. And she did get buffed in the jungle on this patch. Her passive ends up doing, I think, 150% damage to jungle monsters. So that does help her clear the jungle a bit, too. But just overall, pretty solid, well-rounded champion. Her early game's not the most insane, but it's okay. But yeah, just that combination of survivability, high sustained damage, and pretty high burst damage, and just really good synergy with like very cost efficient items, allows her to cheat the curve a little bit. I talk about that a lot, but that's just so true. If something has cheaper items than something else, if she starts getting her rod going at 2,600, I think, and someone else is waiting for 3,200 on Ludens, that's a really long time. That's like, I think CS per minion wave, not including the cannon, is something around like 110 gold with like perfect CS. So, and then you're going to get the cannon minion as well. But if you think that like most people and most elos are only going to get half of the CS, maybe, then people are going to be averaging like maybe 80 gold or something per minute, maybe even less than that. And so when you're talking about like something being 600 gold short, that puts her ahead by like 6 minutes or 7 minutes a lot of times on items. And that's a massive amount of time where you're going to be stronger than they are. So the fact that she can get cheap items like Rod at 2,600, Nashor's Tooth at 2,900. I think Nashor's might actually be 3,000 now, but it's insanely efficient as well. It's like 150% efficient. Just makes it really good. So good items, good runes, strong playstyle for this type of meta where once again it's slowing down a little bit like we talked about with the AD carry. She's not as much of a threat of getting completely blown out and like, one-shot crit, one-shot by Rengar or Talon. That can still happen. She also can get Zanya's really comfortably, which is another cheap item. It's like 2,600 gold. That's effective. So she just has really good itemization options, really good runing options, and she can flex, which is awesome because then they don't know if you're going mid or if you're going jungle, so they may not counterpick you as much. And if your jungler can play the champ too, then you can just say, well, I just got counterpicked mid lane or whatever. They picked Kassadin into me. Can you play this jungle, and can I play like Talon or something in a Kassadin? Not everybody's going to do that, but that is at least an option that's on the table, right, that other roles or that a lot of other champs can't do. So, if nothing else, it'll confuse them because they're not going to be sure, especially if you're an early pick, if you're going jungle or if you're going mid. So, that's really nice. Okay, part 2 of that is Echo. Now, Echo does have a slightly lower win rate mid, so I have him just a bit lower, but they're very, very similar, Echo and Diana, in terms of their playstyle, their contributions, and what makes them strong, is that Echo cheats the curve, gets really strong items very cheaply, right? So a lot of times he's going to go Proto Belt, 2,500 gold, Zanya's 2,600 gold, really high base damage. Now, he's going to be a little bit more mobile and a little bit more sticky than Diana, but I think his sustained damage is going to be slightly lower. His burst is probably going to be similar, maybe a little bit higher. His sustained damage is going to be lower. However, he does offer a stun, which is really nice. If you do land that stun in a team fight, it's just devastating. It's like a 2-second stun. I think it might be a 2.25-second stun. On that W, he's very good against other burst assassins, which Diana's got some pretty good game against assassins, but Echo has some really good game against assassins because he just gets all of his health back off of his R. He's a bit harder to play. I'm not sure about the wave clear. I think they're similar on the wave clear. I believe he's probably a better jungler than Diana is, but I'm not sure. So she's going to do higher sustained damage, I believe, to things like Baron, Dragon, tanks, but he's going to have a bit more mobility and a bit more play in like a squishy assassin type of meta But like I said, they're both very similar type of profile in the style of game that they want to play and what makes them strong. So both of them can be good. So I'd say if it's just up in the air and you're just as good on both champs, I'd play Diana into a lower if the enemy team has more tankiness, lower damage, and Echo into a squishier team that has more upfront burst damage. But I mean, they're both going to be solid. And then Kassadin kind of fits that mold as well if you're not seeing a trend here. Now, the thing about Kassadin, Echo and Diana come online fairly early because their items are a little bit cheaper and they scale fairly well later on to the game, but a lot of times, and so they do go up, but Kassadin, like, his chart is just through the roof later on. If he gets to level 16, it's almost impossible to lose unless you just really screw something up. So Kassadin is kind of the extreme case of, like, being a lot weaker in the early game than Diana and Echo. His items, typically, I think he still is going to go Rod into tier. He has to have tier, and I believe a lot of times he's getting Rod as well, so that's a double charge item. So it's going to take him a while to come online, but if he can survive, if he can make it, if he just gets a couple of kills, it's very difficult to deal with him. So both of those items are very efficient once they're fully charged, Archangels and Rod, but they take a little while to come online. There might be some games where he doesn't get Rod. He might just go Archangels into, like, Lichbane or something. I'm not a Kassadin expert, but the main thing with him is he's good against other AP champions. I think he would ultimately be pretty good against Diana and Echo because he gets 15% magic resist at all times, regardless of items, because of his passive. And then his Q gives him a magic damage shield as well. And he can put down so much damage, and he can run people down so well because he has a blink every 2 seconds at level 16, which is just nuts. And if he gets it charged up, he can actually, like, if he sits in a bush and just, like, ults 3 times just in place while he's waiting on someone to come up, then he can just ult on top of them and roll his hand across the keyboard and probably do, like, 2,000 damage and delete him. So he's just extremely difficult to deal with late game because of his mobility, because of how much burst and sustained damage that he has, and just how hard it is to kill him, through the Rod of the Ages, through the shield that he gets off of his Q, through the Archangel's shield. There's just so many things that you have to get through to kill the Kassadin. So Kassadin's extremely dangerous right now, although his early game is a bit more suspect. Games are going longer. I think in the preseason it was really like maybe 25-minute games, 25 to 30. Now it's 30 to 35, maybe even like 40 minutes, like 35 to 40 minutes. And the game's slowing down a lot because dragons are worth less, plates are worth less, people are playing less damage champs. A lot of the really high damage champs have been nerfed. So I think that is making Kassadin a much spookier champ than he has been in the past. And Kiana, I still think is pretty good. I mean, she's one of the best assassins at roaming that I have listed here. I mean, you could say Talon or something too, but the thing about Kiana is that she has 2 different forms of CC, which are really nice. So she can contribute in team fights. Her ult, can single-handedly win team fights if you push a couple of people into a wall. And then she has that basically point-click CC. I think it's if she gets the water element, and I don't know exactly all of her combos. I think it's something like the water element, and then you Q onto them and press one of the buttons, the W or whatever, and it's like pretty much a guaranteed route, which is why she's so strong in Pro, is because you do have that guaranteed route, and she can roam, and she does have good team fight presence. So, her win rate's still pretty good in Pro. People have backed off of playing her as much, because I think after one of those patches, like 10-2 or maybe 10-3, I don't remember, they kind of nerfed her jungle a little bit, I think. I can't remember exactly. So she was not as much of a flex pick, which was what made her uniquely powerful in Pro. But she still had a 56% win rate in Pro. The solo queue, not so much. It's going to be a bit lower. I think it was like 47, 48%. That was... no, that is mid lane. Kiana, there we go. Actually, not that bad. 51%. But nevertheless, just the fact that she roams, she does have team fight games, she does a ton of burst damage, she's really good on ganks because she has that point-click route, gives her a lot of utility. So I think that she's really solid. Then the last one that I'll put down here is Katarina, who is probably the best snowball option if you're really good on her. Now, she is extremely difficult to play at a fully optimal level, and it's very, very dangerous. If they have a lot of CC, if they have a lot of tanks, you need to be careful with Katarina. She can do, like, some decent sustained damage if she does get to the squishies, but if they do have a lot of tanks, it's going to be tough. You might want to consider Echo or Diana if they have, like, an Ornn and a Zac or something like that. But Katarina, if they don't have a lot of CC, if you do have the outplay potential, you can just take over games by yourself. She does so much burst damage, and she gets those resets, and she can just completely dominate people. So excellent Smurf champion, excellent if nobody's playing a tank, but can be a little problematic if they start rolling out the tanks. So just be aware of that. But overall, mid lane is one of the most versatile lanes as well. You know, there's a lot of stuff that can work. I mean, Fizz can be good. They did just nerf stopwatch, so it's less likely people are going to have the stopwatch, or if they do get it, it's going to be much later if they do take perfect timing. So that's very good for Fizz, because stopwatch is one of the hard counters to him. The problem with that is Diana, Echo are both going to be taking, Hourglass pretty early in a lot of cases. So, he can have some tough matchups. Talon, if you get ahead, he can work. He just falls off a cliff late game, especially against tanks. I've just seen so many Talons get ahead and then goof around and try to, 1v3 a couple of times at 25 minutes, feed away their advantage, and then just be totally worthless in team fights. So Ari's another one who could be pretty good. Cassiopeia is good too. We already talked about her in ADC. I'll put Flex on here as well. We already talked about her in terms of ADC. It's similar in mid lane. She's very good at breaking down some of those tanks. If they pick something, something cute like an Ornn middle like they're doing in Pro, Cassiopeia could be a pretty good pick into that, I think. But yeah, there are several champs that can work. Okay, last couple of roles here. I think Master Yi is going to be the best jungler overall, especially if you're under Diamond. Like, even in Platinum, I think he's still very strong. There are just so many combinations with him that are just so dangerous right now. I mean, you have the classic, Taric middle, Yi jungle, or you could even do it with Lulu middle, Yi jungle. So you can do kind of the booster comp like that. But even just flat out, just Master Yi in the jungle, just against everything else that's going on right now, can be very strong. He's really, really good in the tanks, traditionally, because he just doesn't care about their resistances. Once he gets Blade of the Ruined King, Ginsu's, and Blood Razor, he just completely mows through tanks most of the time. He takes dragons extremely well, barons extremely well. He can split push well. He can 1v1. He can even clean up team fights really well with his ult. He is somewhat squishy, obviously, so that is an issue. But if he gets ahead, it's almost impossible to stop him. The game is slowing down. It's increasingly more difficult to punish him in the early game. And with Enchanters coming back, that's extremely good news for him. Like Lulu and it's absolutely broken. Of course, you get the extra attack speed. You get the on-hit damage of picks, which does work point blank on Yi if you put a shield on him. You have your ultimate to boost him up, knock him up into the air, add a slow to him. So that's really good. Even Janna's pretty good as well. It doesn't seem like it'd be amazing because it's like, well, Janna's more of a peeler and he's more of a diver. But just even putting that shield on him for the 50 extra AD just converts to so much extra damage with his double strike, his Gensu's, the true damage, and the AD ratio on that true damage. That a lot of those champs are going to be very good. Nami's another one, pretty good, right? You can put the slow on him with the E. You can use the wave to follow up whenever he dives. There's just a lot of really good champions with him. Rakan is another one that's very good. You can dive in after him with your shield plus your R. And you can get Ardent Sensor on those champions as well to buff him up. So there's just a lot of really, really good combinations out there. And if there aren't assassins, if there aren't a lot of punishing champions that are going to invade him, then he is very good. Now, as you get up to higher elo brackets, Diamond Plus, you will see more Elises. You will see more competent Lee Sins and things like that will invade and try to punish him early. But a lot of times, Platinum and lower, definitely Gold and lower as you move down the chart. It just becomes increasingly difficult to deal with him because people won't shut him down early. It's really chaotic. People are just running around, dying all the time, and that's exactly what he likes. So it just always feels like you're never safe when he's on the enemy team. There's always that one chance, even if you're really far ahead, you just happen to get low in a team fight. He gets a couple of resets, he gets a triple kill, and it's just that sinking feeling. You're like, oh, God, we just lost, didn't we? When you were ahead and you give the Master Yi 3 kills at 25 minutes into the game. So you're just never safe. It's kind of the same thing with Kassadin. It's like it just takes one fight where you just kind of screw up and they get those resets and they chase everybody down and they just scale so well with gold that it's just lights out. So, challenger players, pro players, they're not going to have him up there. But, for all of us, blue collar, elo people here that aren't living in the ivory tower, he's going to be extremely strong. Zac is another one who's rising up. Now, this is something that pro players, I've been noticing in solo queue, are playing a lot more. It's getting a lot of attention on tier lists. And he is one of the sort of premier beneficiaries of this meta that's changing right now, particularly the changes to Balmy Cinder on the last patch. because he obviously loves to stack health. He's one of the highest scaling champs with health in the game. Cho'Gath is up there as well. Cho'Gath loves health. Mundo loves health. But the thing about Zac is his engage. Like, because he's not only a tank that can farm the jungle pretty efficiently and quickly, but he also like can get around wards and engage from all sorts of bizarre, like, weird angles where people wouldn't expect it. And it's so hard to peel him once he gets to the back. I mean, Thresh can do it with his Flay. Janna can do it with the Tornado. So there are a couple of options, but if you're not playing like a champ with a displacement like that, then he's just going to fly right over, he's going to fly right over Nautilus, he's going to fly right over Leona, and he's going to get on that back line and just be a disruptive pest, and it's going to be extremely difficult to kill him because he has all of that healing from those little bloblets that are, sprinkled around. And so it's just a combination of he's extremely difficult to kill, he has very easy access to the back line, he has very good gank pathing. And, just the combination of items that he gets are so strong right now. Cinder Hulk just got that buff off of Balmy Cinder, right? Where it does a lot of extra damage, gives him much faster wave clear. Particularly as he gets more and more health, it scales up more and more and more. I think it's 4% of your max health on that explosion. So he's just going to be able to blast right through Raptors, Wolves, all of that stuff, and get to ganking more. And he can do that so easily with just these spam ganks with his E. It's just a nightmare to try to ward for him a lot of the times. And not only that, but then he gets into Spirit Visage. You know what Spirit Visage is really good against? Sustained AP damage. You know who does a lot of sustained AP damage? Diana and Echo and Kassadin. So we're kind of moving towards this meta more and more where we're getting more of these AP type of fighters. Even things like Ornn, later on in the game, a lot of his damage is mostly going to be AP. Sejuani, mostly AP. Right, if there's a Cassiopeia bottom, which is still going to be rare, let's be fair, or a Cassiopeia mid or whatever, it's still going to be AP, at least AP. So there's a lot more like AP champions, Nami, Janna, Lulu. Not that they do a lot of damage in the first place, but they also do AP. So there's just a lot more AP like coming into the meta than there was, maybe 2 or 3 patches ago. And being able to take the Spirit Visage, which is going to give you the health to scale with the Cinder Hulk, and that Balmy passive that scales with his own like healing that he gets off of his bloblets and the damage that he does off of one of his abilities. I thought one of his abilities does it based on his maximum damage. I can't remember. But he scales extremely well with health. That gives him the extra healing from the 30%. Also, if you have something on your team that's going to be healing him up, if you do still have a Nami on your team, or maybe, maybe someone picks a Sona or Soraka or whatever, then you can get that extra healing off of Spirit Visage as well. So that's a really good item. And then Warmogs, obviously, is going to go really well with that stuff as well. So it's kind of like, what I was saying with a lot of these champions. It's just the itemizations and the runes are just lining up extremely well with him right now. So that's really good. Some people are even taking Conquer on him. I was looking earlier. A lot of people are doing, still doing Aftershock, but more and more people are trying Conquer out. And I think the big deal with that is you just get a ton of extra healing. Like, he does have some okay AP ratios, but like, as you can see, more and more people are experimenting with Conquer. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily good or not. I'd have to do a deeper dive into it, but it's certainly something that people are interested in. So, we'll have to check it out. Now, some of those Conquer, I believe a lot of those are top lane, but you are seeing some junglers trying it out. So I think that Aftershock is probably still the place where you want to be, but Conquer could be an option for more sustain and more damage in kind of longer fights. So I think Zac's going to be really solid. And then Lee Sin's another one. He's just very, very good with Conquer, right? He stacks it up extremely well with how his Q works and kind of his double, the double interactions on his abilities. And that gives him, and he has really good AD ratios. A lot of people forget this about Lee, but, he not only has high base damage ratios early, but he does have high damage later. It's just that a lot of times he can't itemize into, like, raw AD stuff unless he's, like, ultra far ahead. But he does make very, very good use of the AD off of Conquer. He's got a 100% ratio here and 100% on the reconnects. That's a 200% bonus AD ratio, which is excellent for Conquer. And then his Tempest even has a 100% AD ratio, and his ult has a 200%. So he has really, really good scaling. And then he's going to get the lifesteal off of his Iron Will for up to 30% on the lifesteal, and he gets the full, I think it's 15% off of Conquer. So he's kind of off to the races doing a ton of damage. You might even, I don't think you take Ravenous Hunter or you you probably take the attack speed for the jungle. I don't think you do the Bloodborne. But either way, I mean, in longer fights, he's going to be able to function fairly well just because he's going to have that Conqueror stacked and he's going to be putting out some decent damage and adding in some extra disruption, you know, with the Safeguard, with the slow off of Tempest. He's not bad in longer fights. So that has traditionally been one of his weaknesses, is that he falls off so hard late game you can't do anything with him. He's basically just a kick bot. That he actually can still keep contributing things in kind of these scrappy skirmishes. Now, he's not going to be as strong in like a super late fight as some of these other champs out there, but he has more game than he used to. So I think he's really strong right now. Runes are lining up very well. Items are pretty good on him. You know, Warrior's still going to be solid. He can get Black Cleaver, which is very good for helping to carve out those tanks later on. If you need one of those on your team. So he does bring quite a bit of utility. Then his kick is one of the premier engages if you play around it correctly. That's a big if. It's difficult to do correctly. He's one of the hardest champions in the game to play at a fully optimal level, but even like okay Master Yis are doing all right now, which has not been the case for a while, right? It's just like just in the preseason, you know, once they reworked Conquer, he started to come back in and actually be a pretty respectable champion again. Even though he's always a popular one. So, yeah, good early game, great mid game if he gets ahead, and then actually sort of relevant sometimes in the late game. Elise is another one. You're seeing just Lee Sin and Elise over and over again in Pro, and they do get a lot better at higher elo, but I think that she still can be all right in kind of lower elo. She does have really good farm. She has excellent dive. Just she can make really good kind of do-it-yourself plays, like I mentioned with Cassiopeia out of bushes. She is one of the few champs that can, you know, set up, get that stun, you know, roll your hand across the keyboard and delete people. So she does, like, a very, very high amount of damage, like, really early on. She can get just the double pin with the Sork Boots, Oblivion Orb, and just delete a lot of people because she has so many spells that do damage, right? Because she has 6 different abilities, most of which do damage. So she has the do-it-yourself, you know, where you can invade, you can get vision control, you can bush gank through the lanes and just completely delete people. And then later on in the game, she still has like okay utility. She's obviously not the most amazing late game, but if you do land one of those webs like later on, then that can, you know, create a chain CC to make a play to get those kills. So she does have some decent game with sieges and webbing and things like that later on, and she can still delete squishies out of bushes and stuff like that later on too. So she just keeps building damage. You know, she never gets tanky, so she's going to keep deleting people. So she's obviously not going to be as good against things like Zac or some of these other champs that are going to be getting a lot of magic resist or just getting kind of tanky later on, but she does have a good early game. And then Nunu is like the other tank that I want to mention here. I don't think we're in a full-on tank meta where everybody's just playing tanks everywhere. But Nunu is one worth mentioning. A lot of places don't like put him as highly. But he still does have a really high win rate overall. He's the third highest, 54%, and he just brings a lot to the table in terms of utility. He has a great safe clear. You know, he can probably get away from some of these invades, you know, from the Lee Sin, from the Elise, and that's going to be difficult for someone like Master Yi or Zac to deal with early on in the game. But he can deal with that. He has great scuttle control, just great control over dragons and barons. If you're ever around, you're basically guaranteed the last hit unless you really goof it up with your Q plus smite combo. He ends up being pretty tanky. He does like Cinder Hulk a lot, so that's going to help him with his clear, which is already strong. And then the thing is, like, he gives a lot of extra attack speed in team fights, potentially to your AD carry. So if you have a good AD carry on your team with his passive Blood Boil, you can hand out even more attack speed to your Jinx or your Vayne or whatever. So it gives you a nice little extra buff for team fights. And then your ult just adds a lot of extra utilities to fights. Not only does it do a lot of damage, but it has that huge slow component to it. It even has a cripple component to it where it slows people's attack speed. So it's really nice. You can kind of make your own play out of bushes as well, especially at lower elos. If you get a fully channeled ult, it's just going to do an insane amount of damage. So I think he's pretty good, and he can even itemize into things like Knight's Vow or Locket if he wants to later on and just kind of be a utility tank. So he's not going to put out as much damage typically as some of these other tanks, and he's not going to be able to get fully to the backline as easily as something like Zac. His ganks aren't as crazy as Zac, although it's okay. Like, his lane ganks are pretty good with that snowball. He still has some pretty nice game overall. So I think Nunu is definitely worth mentioning, especially in solo queue, as a really good sort of tank that can almost be like a secondary support type of champ in the right circumstances. And then the final group that I'll mention here, and if you want to go ahead and load her up, we'll be ready in about 10 minutes, dear.
That's what you say, but
That's what it's going to be.
I have problems believing you.
It's going to happen. 10 minutes. So top lane, I think that... so we move over there. I think Darius is who I'm going to put up there. I know people are going to say it's Ornn. And if it was pro play, I would say Ornn. But the thing is, and I do have Ornn as number 2. But the thing is, like, Ornn is somewhat difficult to play. Like, you can screw up a lot of his stuff. And I've just seen a lot of Ornns. It just go really far south on him. And I've seen Darius is, you know, he's a lot easier to play. And you just take over. And you just, like, completely murder everybody. He has great game against tanks as well. Once he stacks up that bleed. And he's got the true damage from his ult. So I think that Darius is probably going to be a little bit better overall. He doesn't really benefit from some of the newer changes other than other people getting nerfed out. So like Set got nerfed. Mordekaiser got nerfed by a good bit. But then there's Darius still being the same old Darius, right? And so a couple of things that I think are going to make him strong right now. People are taking Ghost on him over Teleport, which... You don't have the teleport for late game, but honestly, he's not an amazing scaler anyways. And people aren't playing split pushers right now as much. Like, you're not seeing as many, like, Camille's, Fiora's, Trendemir's. It's like, it's okay. But those champs are, I think, in laning phase, just getting busted up a lot lately. Unless you're just smurfing or really, really good on them. So people aren't running, like, split push threats that are as dangerous where you need teleport as much as possible. A lot of times, it's just coming down to these team fights, right? And I think that he's just going to contribute some of the most to team fights. Ornn obviously contributes quite a lot too to team fights. But just being able to get those resets, right? If you get one kill, you know, in a team fight, it's basically over if they don't disengage, because you're just going to run around, apply those 5 stack of bleeds, and just run around and blast everybody. And the fact that you're seeing more and more enchanters right now as well who can speed him up. Usually, like, Nami can speed him up, Lulu can speed him up. Shirelia's has become a very popular item. More and more people are getting things like Shirelia's, which can speed him in. Cloud Drake getting things. Well, the Cloud Drake soul, they did take the movement speed off of Cloud Drake, so now it's only on the soul. But there's just a lot more movement speed in general, I think, right now for him to really be able to stick to people. And the big innovation is just Ghost. I mean, people have been doing that for a while, but the thing that makes it special right now, like I just mentioned, is that you don't have to have teleport as much as you have needed it in the past, because you don't have to match split pushers because they aren't in the meta right now as much. So split pushing can still work, but mostly it's 5v5s around objectives or just killing people out of bushes. So I think that's going to make him really good. I think the Trinity is where you want to be. It just adds a bunch of extra damage. You can take Black Cleaver, but the win rate is far lower. You do have to be careful looking at win rates on items. I know Freak does some of this too in his video, and it's easy to get caught up in that and say, oh my god, you know, Trinity has 56% win rate and Cleaver has 50%, therefore Cleaver's trash. But the thing about that is a lot of people are probably going to get their Phage first, and then they're going to decide whether they want to go Trinity or Cleaver. And they're probably going to go Cleaver in losing matchups most of the time. Like, if they're already getting destroyed in lane, it's smarter to go Cleaver because it's a cheaper item, and at least you're going to have utility for your team, even though you're behind. So I don't think it's necessarily that Cleaver is bad. I think it's just that Cleaver is what people get when they're already getting blasted. And so it's just naturally going to have a lower win rate. And that's kind of like told in these numbers here, right? Like, they're getting Cleaver at 14 minutes and they're getting Trinity Force at 15. Although Trinity is much more expensive than Cleaver, which tells me that they're behind on their build a lot of times if they're getting Cleaver that late. 'Cause it's only 3,000 gold versus 3,700, and there's no way that on average Darius is going to get 700 gold in 1 minute. So that tells me that either you're far ahead. What did I do? I don't know what I did there. But it tells me you're either farther ahead when you get Trinity or you're farther behind when you get Cleaver. It's one of the two. And, you know, really that's just two sides of the same coin. So I do think that Cleaver can still be good if you're up against a lot of tanks like an Ornn plus a Zac, and you just need to cut through them later on. But Trinity is going to be better if you're trying to get that hard carry by yourself, especially if you're not up against tanks. So, anyways, he's my pick for most people in most elos. However, the pick that most people are going to say is Ornn. Now, Ornn is extremely strong right now. He does have a 53% win rate as a tank, which is rare. A lot of times you don't see tanks that are that high. And obviously, if you've watched any pro play, you just know that he's really OP, and you're just constantly wondering why don't they ban him? Because he can be played top lane, he can be played mid lane, and he's just so strong in the pro style of meta right now, which is very slow scaling team fight 5v5 meta, and he's just really good at that. So they've buffed this champion several times, and he's just been a beneficiary once again of other champs getting nerfed, right? So the Conqueror nerfs are massive for him, when they took the true damage off of Conqueror because he's going to get a lot of armor, he's going to get a lot of magic resist, he gets even more, that 10% bonus off of his passive. He gets preferable back timings because he can just buy stuff in his shop, just by himself, in the lane, so he doesn't even have to back, so he can almost always race you. So you're going to have to take unfavorable backs for him, or versus him. So he puts you in that kind of position. Then he hands out about 5,000 free gold as the game goes on. And the buff to Balmy Cinder is huge on him because he always wants to go Sunfire, because typically he's going to go Sunfire into Abyssal Mask because those are the two most cost-efficient items, and they both turn into Ornn upgrades. He has to get the Ornn upgrade items. So his itemization is partially limited, but the fact that you get so much value out of those items makes it okay. And then, of course, he has a really good engage with his ult. He has a lot of CC with his Q as well. And just puts out a lot of percentage-based health damage with his W. So he just puts out a lot of damage for a tank, has good CC, good utility, and just hands out like 5,000 free gold to your team as the game goes on. And he's very difficult to punish in lane. So I just think that a lot of things have aligned to make Ornn strong, and I know that's not like a news flash for anyone that's been watching, but I do have him, I do think he's probably a little bit lower than Darius overall, once again, just because Darius is easier to execute on. I see so many people screw up the Ornn, so he is still very, very strong though. Set is another one that I think is really good still. He has received several nerfs, but he does still have the highest win rate in the top lane right now. Now, it's not 57% like it used to be, but it's still really strong. He has a lot of CC, a point-click engage. His W is still insane. It gives you a massive shield with massive true damage, AoE, in fights. So he just brings a lot to the table. Similarly, I do think that Trinity... Whoa, are you okay? I do think that Trinity is going to be optimal on him a lot of times, but at the same time, it's the same story, right? Where he's going to be buying this when he's ahead, right? And when he's behind, he's going to be getting Cleaver. So I know LS loses his mind, on the Korean broadcast anytime anyone builds Cleaver. But the thing that you have to remember about this item is extremely cost efficient. You going upstairs all by yourself? Yeah. Good job. It's because it reduces the armor, and that helps everybody on your team. It's not just that you personally get armor penetration for this. It reduces the armor for everybody. So that means that when you're against other tanks, like if you're set against Ornn or something like that, for example, reducing that armor is going to help your AD carry chew through them so much easier, or your Lee Sin, or whatever you're running. It's going to be a lot stronger. So are you dealing as much damage? No, but it's overall, is your team dealing more damage in a team fight if you're able to stack up Cleaver stacks on multiple people? Yes. So that's ultimately what it comes down to, Trinity Force is going to bring you a lot more personal glory. It's going to be better for dueling. It's going to be better for split pushing. But a lot of times Cleaver is going to be better for team fights, and it's going to be better if you are just getting completely blasted in your lane and you're behind. You should be getting Cleaver. So I'll tell you, he still has plenty of damage to kill you. Are you having fun over there, Rory? Are you a fun-having baby? He still is going to have plenty of damage to kill most squishy champions, even if he takes Cleaver. I got blasted. I got blown up by him one time, almost right when he came out, when all he had was Cleaver, and I think I had Frozen Heart as Rakan. And we were both, level 10 or something, and he still just deleted me. Oh, is that fun, Rory? Even though I dodged his true damage, he still just tackled me and killed me, so he still does a lot of damage with Cleaver. So it just depends. If you're really far ahead, it's basically just like Darius. You're really far ahead, you can go Trinity. If you're not so much, you can go Cleaver. But I do think he's still going to be very strong, particularly if you want that point-click engage to tackle the enemy tank onto their backline. I still think he's going to be very, very good right now. I mean, he could still deserve to be number one, but after the nerfs, I don't know. I mean, these three are all really good. You can't really go wrong with picking Darius or Set. They're all very strong right now. Okay, the other one, a little more controversial probably, is the Singed pick. What is it?
It's now been 10 minutes.
Okay, we'll go ahead and load her up. We're almost done. I have 2 left to talk about. She's just having a giggle, aren't you, Rory? This baby's having fun.
Maybe needs to use the potty first.
You're just having way too much fun, Rory. We don't do that much laughing in this house.
Come on, Rory.
She's gonna stop for a second. You can laugh as much as you want, Rory. Daddy's being silly. She's like, I don't need your permission, Daddy. I'm laughing. I'm having fun. Okay. Now, Cinch did get nerfed on this patch, which was kind of a meme. Everyone's like, why did he get nerfed? I mean, he did have like a 54% win rate, but the thing is, like, he has pretty good matchups against the top picks. Like, historically, he's very good against tanks. Now, I don't know about his matchup in the Darius. It's probably not amazing. I don't know. It's probably okay. But, like, the Set matchup is very good because you can put that damage on him and just run away and kind of keep him in the smoke and maybe outplay his Haymaker. You can wait the shield out. So I think that he's pretty good in a Set. And then I think he's pretty good in an Ornn historically, too. Because you can just flip Ornn, you know, just run around, dodge his stuff. And the fact that he gets Rylai's plus Leandries is very nice. It does put up quite a bit of sustained damage. It makes him a serious split push threat. Remember, there are not a lot of other split pushers out there right now, so having him as someone who can split, like, Set, Ornn, and Darius aren't amazing at splitting because they don't have great escapes and they can get run down and killed. They're team fight tanks. So he can do the team fight thing too, to an extent, but he can also split as well. And he can take teleport. He doesn't have to take other stuff. Now, Ornn and Set are going to take teleport as well, but I think that's pretty good, you know, and, like, he can throw his goo on Ornn when Ornn's doing his Ornn Horn, and I believe that's not going to allow him to dash to reactivate it. So that's a really good way to, like, stuff Ornn so that he can't do his thing. I don't know if Set is going to be able to use his ult or not on somebody through it. He does become unstoppable during it, but I don't know if he can start it when he's, like, standing on the goo or not. I'm trying to think of something that's similar to that interaction. I'm not entirely sure. I think it might stop him. If he hasn't started it, I think it might stop him from activating it until he gets out of it. So that goo is just really, really pesky against a lot of champions out there. And you can also use your E to, you know, disrupt people as well. So he has a lot of options and puts out pretty high sustained damage with his Leandries, Rylai's in fights. Now, yes, if you're up against some of these tanks that are getting Spirit Visage and things like that, that can be a problem. But in general, I think he has great matchups against tanks. I'm not 100%. Let me see. Common matchups. Yeah, this is exactly kind of what I was thinking. Now, okay, it looks like the Darius one is not great. But the Ornn matchup is almost, you win 55% of the time, 54% of the time against Set, 56 against Aatrox, 51 against Garen. So you do have really good game against a lot of the popular champs outside of Darius. So Darius, Ornn, Set. Doesn't tell you Kleds. Presumably it's around 50%. But these are the most common things that you go up against, and you have really high win rates. And Mordekaiser's still pretty strong. A lot of people might even have Mord in the top 5 right now. So yeah, that's what I'm saying, is that, like, in general, when you think about Singe, you may not necessarily think, oh, that's OP, but it's a meta call. It's that, like, how the meta is shaping up right now with these immobile, like, tank E type of champs in the top. He has a really good game against that, except for Darius. But yeah, and looks like he's very good against Lee Sin and Elise too. You know, he wins against Lee 55%. You might think, well, why is that? Well, he can peel him really well. Once he throws that goo on him, Lee's not jumping anywhere, and he can fling him back and help peel off of the AD carry as well. Similar with Elise, it's really hard to for Elise to be able to do her thing too. So you'll notice a lot of these champions that he has high win rates against are popular. Those are the 2 most popular junglers, or 2 of them. 2 of the strongest, 3 of the strongest, most popular top laners. Okay. And you've got your Thresh and your Nautilus and your Leona. You know, good game against all of that stuff too. Really bad game against Lulu, but he's just good against a lot of the stuff out there. And he's unique as like an AP damage dealing top laner if you need that, right? If you still have an AD jungler or you have an AD mid laner, you got a Kiana mid and you've got a Lee Sin jungle, you know, he's a pretty good AP option top. And then the last one that I'll mention here is Kled. So this could have been Garen as well. There are several other top laners that are pretty good. But I just picked Kled as kind of your fighter, bruiser type of champion. Just one more of those up there because he does snowball really hard. You can catch people off guard because they don't understand how his mount works a lot of times. And he just does a shocking amount of damage with his violent tendencies or whatever. I think it's his E or his W. I don't remember which one it is. Like his thing where he hits 3 times and does a lot of damage because you can get an auto attack reset with the Titanic Hydra and it's just like poof, people just explode. So especially next patch when they buff Hydra, that's going to be extremely good on Kled. But not only does he fight really well and he's kind of confusing, has some mechanics that you can use to outplay your opponent, but he also has that ultimate which serves as an excellent team fight engage tool if the rest of your team lacks engage. So he's great if you have some of these other champs, you know, on your team that just want to dive in there and get those kills, right? So if you've got the Diana on your team, or you got the Master Yi jungle, or the Echo, or whatever, and you just want to run in there, the Leona, the Nautilus, you can just run the whole squad in there and catch people out and get some kills. That also means that he can take Ignite in the top lane and still show up to fights in a reasonable amount of time, even though he doesn't have teleport. So that gives him even more kill pressure in the lane, whereas a lot of those other champs are probably going to be taking teleport, except for Darius. So you could have that potential advantage there. Now, I'm not sure, you know, about his matchups into some of these champs. Looks like his Ornn and Darius matchup are not insane, but he does well against Set, Aatrox, Mord, a lot of kind of your top-end champs there. So, anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Be sure to like and subscribe if you did, and I'll see you next time.